Guys, it might be happening. It might just happen. A little while back, I put together this theory video that suggested that Chapter 6 would be a naval-themed DLC. Now, of course, it hasn't quite turned out that way, but there are hints and suggestions that part of my theory could indeed be correct. Temple Yao is back at it again with a hot and fresh data mine for Battlefield 5, uncovering some rather lovely details of what could be coming later on in Chapter 6. So everyone take their pinch of salt right now, because nothing from this point onwards is official information. First of all then, a 5th Pacific map is on the cards. Currently referred to as the Pacific Ocean, the map looks set to become part of Chapter 6, albeit later on past the halfway point of the chapter. Currently in-game, you can only see 7 of the 12 weeks of the Tides of War for Chapter 6, and that initially led people to think that this chapter would be shorter than previous ones, but DICE then clarified after the launch that that wasn't the case, and that future weeks would be added in at a later date. Now, however, the reason behind that delay in adding those extra weeks might have been unearthed. One of the Tides of War challenges, set for currently one of these weeks that's not being shown, is win 1 round on the Pacific Ocean. Now, if that's not a nice little hint towards a 5th map, then I don't know what is. The name of the map, Pacific Ocean, that might well be a development title or a working title at the moment, and the data mine hasn't really revealed any information about when this map is due to release either. The Tides of War challenge that revealed the map, that was slotted into week 9, but according to Temple Yao recently, there have been several items that have not been in the correct places. So right now, if the map is set to launch in Chapter 6, then it's more of a launch window, and that will probably be after week 7, which is currently the latest week that's viewed in the Tides of War in-game. Now, obviously, the name of the map, that does lead us to think about one specific location for the map, and certainly one type of gameplay, naval combat. Now, I've spoken about this previously in other videos. I've said that, at the moment, I think DICE is missing something in their lineup of vehicles for the Pacific to support open water combat, and that is PT boats. If this Pacific Ocean map is set out in open water, as the data mine suggests, then I think the introduction of PT boats would be needed to facilitate not only transport across that open water towards whatever objectives the map might have, but also to attack other vehicles like the amphibious tanks and potentially planes in the skies as well. According to the data mine, at the moment the map supports amphibious tanks, airplanes and dinghies as vehicles, which, if this is a naval combat map, that does leave quite a lot to be desired, but we might not be getting the full picture here. This data mine is only revealing a very small portion of what may be coming in the future. Even Temple Yao says that even though there is a suggestion there is a 5th map here, there's really not that much information at the moment. With that potential new map in mind, however, it would be a big bolster to the content available in Chapter 6. We have launched with an admittedly very good new map, the Solomon Islands, along with 3 new weapons and 2 new gadgets as part of the chapter rewards, all of which, in my opinion, have been very fun to use and mess around with for the last week, and I've got no doubt that the gadgets, like the lunge mine, they're going to sustain their entertainment value for a lot longer, just simply because of their memeing potential. You saw my video and you know what I think of it. I think that gadget's really, really fun. But when you think about longer term, there are still over 2 months to go in Chapter 6, and when it comes to details for what we're looking at into the future, those details have been pretty light so far. So perhaps the reason that DICE only put 7 of the 12 weeks into the Tides of War screen was so that they could fill in the rest with a later patch later on in the chapter when they were more confident about what they could launch within that window. If we look back to 2019, that shows us how many deadlines DICE missed with their content. And so instead of putting these big launch dates on everything, so far what we've seen in late 2019 and early 2020 with the Pacific, DICE have simply been announcing what they know they can launch, and then they've left the rest until later on. Maybe that's what we're going to be seeing here again with this new map, Pacific Ocean. Now, there are two other pointers within the Tides of War that strengthen this idea of another map coming to Chapter 6. There's one challenge to score a kill whilst riding in a dinghy motorboat, but of course that could apply to any of the Pacific maps at this point. And then the other challenge is to roadkill an enemy using an airplane. That one is quite specific. You might remember from a previous data mine that I covered here on the channel that Temple Yao unearthed new scoring methods if you're combating planes. There was enemy bailed and enemy crashed. Those had been added into the game, they just weren't active yet. And with a map that could potentially be taking place over open water, the chances of pilots bailing out of their plane is going to be a little bit higher since they can parachute down and they maybe still stand a chance of swimming to shore. So I'm not saying it's 100% confirmed because clearly it's not, this is data mined information, but if you start looking a little bit deeper, things are starting to connect together. Okay, so that's the potential for a new map out of the way, which is rather exciting, I do have to say. The fact that I predicted there might be a naval map coming to the game, and potentially there might be a naval map coming to the game. I promise you I didn't have any advanced knowledge of it, since I predicted a naval-themed DLC, and then they released Solomon Islands, so yeah, I was a little bit far off. But there are a couple of other things that I wanted to talk about from recent data mines, and again, a couple of these link into the idea of some sort of naval combat map coming to the game. Now, first up, another new gadget for Chapter 6, or at least another new gadget in the files at the moment. This is the Doppelschuss. It's a German creation given to naval crews to signal and illuminate areas where no other light is available, such as out in the middle of the vast ocean. It's a flare gun that lacks a parachute, so it doesn't operate like the flare gun that's already available in Battlefield 5, but instead it sticks to items in the environment and vehicles. So that means that you could fire it at your own tank or your own transport vehicle, get in the vehicle and drive away, and then you'd have a spotting beacon surrounding your tank or your transport vehicle that would then detect enemy infantry that might be quite close to you. The flares don't stick to infantry, however, which would have been really, really fun and brought back memories of Bad Company 2, but they do a little bit of damage if you manage to fire one and hit an enemy with it. Next up, we've got some information on returning limited time game modes. The Outpost game mode, the Frontlines game mode, and the Rush game modes. They're all set to return in Chapter 6 at some point as well. Of course, they will be limited time offerings. They're not going to be permanent game modes, which still makes me very sad every time I have to say that Rush is a limited time game mode. I'm still of the opinion that that is a core game mode that should be available in the game all of the time, but there is a little bit of hope for it. Apparently it's set to return twice across 2 different weeks in Chapter 6, which is quite interesting. Then we have another unreleased gadget coming back for another outing here, the Einstos Flammenwerfer gadget. This is a limited use handheld flamethrower that would allow a soldier to fire a short burst of flame towards enemies in hopes of setting them on fire. I have no idea if this will ever see the light of day in Battlefield 5. I've got a feeling that this might have been a 5v5 gadget that now may have been transferred across to the main multiplayer, but if the 2 gadgets that have been added in Chapter 6 so far are anything to go by, I'd love some more interesting gadgets in Battlefield 5. I don't think we've had many interesting ones added so far, but the lunge mine has been absolutely brilliant, and the introduction of the bazooka as well against tanks, that makes it really fun, and of course you can snipe people with it. So if DICE wants to add any more cool gadgets into Battlefield 5, then I'm definitely down for that. The as yet unreleased K31-43 Swiss bolt action rifle, that reappeared in a recent update for Battlefield 5. This thing is set up with a unique scope switching system that allows players to switch between iron sights and an integrated 3x magnification scope. This version that was added was not quite working properly, but it was much closer to completion than it was the last time it appeared, so maybe it's closer to finally being added into the game. And then there are already chapter boost pack mentions in the files for chapters 7, 8 and 9, which is really awesome news because it suggests that DICE really does have some longer term plans for Battlefield 5 after the Pacific. So then, right now, the future of Chapter 6 is looking a little bit brighter than it was before, and we've already had a pretty great start to it. 2 weapons being handed out to everybody instead of being included in the chapter rewards. That was pretty welcome. And of course, the release of Solomon Islands. I think we've had a really good start to Chapter 6. I think players were also looking for some reassurance that there would be a little bit more going for Chapter 6 later down the line, and if these data mines can be believed, then that does appear to be the case. But just remember, nothing is official from these data mines until you hear it from EA or DICE. Thanks very much for watching. Leave me a rating and a comment down below. It is always appreciated. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.